Easy now. Papa got things making his
come down. Ooh, you make my high come down. Always tripping when you come around. I'ma have to cut you off, like right now. You see, I don't want to drive me. You can say that for your mama. Maybe you should smoke some. Me tried the marijuana. I was never you good. The vibe was straight. Showed you a couple of things and they ain't finna change. I treated you right. Everything was a gift from a time to your bag and the color on your lip. Yeah, you
Welcome to Seahawks Man to Man podcast, powered by The Athletic. Shout out to the company. My name is Michael-Shawn Dugar. You can follow me on the tweet machine at Mike Dugar. That is MikeDugar. Still verified, baby. Shout out to Elon. Didn't take my check, dog. I appreciate you on that. Shout out to everyone who subscribes and watches us on YouTube. Seahawks Man to Man is the name of the channel. That's Man to Man, the number 2. Man, we appreciate the love and support on there. Chris, holla at him.
What is good, everybody? It is your boy, Christopher Kidd. No blue check for me, but Mike will be joining me soon, as well as Danny B. Kelly, because they are also verified. And last time I checked, I think Elon's about to drop the hammer and make you guys pay. And if you don't want to pay, you can join the non-verified community like myself. You can follow me on Twitter at CKIDD206. And again, that's CKID206.
All right, and as Chris alluded to, we have another pre-draft guest joining us on the pod, joining us again. You know, he's returning after last year. Did a great job talking NFL draft. We have Danny Kelly of The Ringer joining us. Danny, welcome back to the Seahawks Man to Man podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you guys for having me again. Appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely, man. We had to bring you back on, especially after last year. I think the title of the show was Seahawks Cannot Get Cute. We'll get to that later on. And as we discuss this, because obviously we're doing a draft. What word am I looking for? A draft preview. There we go. Brain for our draft preview. So we'll definitely get to that. But to kick things off, man, I got to look at the quarterbacks because I think there's 4 that stand out. And obviously you can pick and choose who you think the best is. But out of those 4 guys, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, maybe 2 will be available, Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. Based on the 2 that I'm guessing you're probably going to go with, who do you think best fits what the Seahawks want to do if they take them with the opportunity to win the job this season and looking forward to the future where Pete Carroll might be out the door?
Yeah, so that's tough. I mean, honestly, all 4 of them you can talk yourself into, I think, at that spot at number 5. I think, you know, from the Seahawks point of view, it makes the most sense to me for them to take Anthony Richardson if he's there, just because they have Geno as the bridge quarterback and that gives them like a high floor. They could still be a winning team. And at the same time, sort of developing Richardson and having the idea that he'll come on in a year or 2 down the line, depending on how well Geno Smith plays, obviously. So, like, to me, he would be the perfect combination of upside and I don't know what the word is, just like he's a little bit raw, so they need to develop him a little bit. So there wouldn't be like a ton of calls to bring him in early if Geno has a bad game here or there. So I think that to me just makes the most sense timeline wise. I do think they would consider CJ Stroud at that spot if he was there. I'm a little leery about Bryce Young, even though I think Bryce Young's an awesome player. Like, they just went through the whole small quarterback thing for like 10 years with Russell Wilson. I don't really know if they want to go back down that road, to be totally honest. So I think that just spooks me a little bit. So I wouldn't have him high on the list, but I do think he's a good player. I got him as my QB too, but just the size outlier factor makes me a little bit leery about, the Seahawks investing in a extreme outlier for size again, just based on the way that they want to run their offense. So, and then Will Levis, I mean, honestly, if they take him at 5, I'd probably be a little bit bummed if I'm being completely honest. But at the same time, like you can see the traits are outstanding. And that's the reason I can absolutely see why teams might like this guy. He has an absolutely cannon for an arm. Like that thing, he can just launch it with zero effort looking. And it's just, he can throw it downfield like 50, 60 yards without like batting an eye. He's got that kind of arm strength. It's very quick release. He's a big, tough guy. I think there's a lot of tools to work with there, but at the same time, you just kind of watch him and you're left wanting something a little bit more from him, I think. And so I don't think he's their guy. I don't think they're going to take him, but anything can happen. Seahawks, they're so unpredictable. So yeah, I would say, that would be my order. I'd say Richardson probably makes the most sense for them. I would not be surprised if Stroud was there that they took him. And then Bryce Young, the size thing scares me. And Will Levis, just like the inconsistencies scare me.
I'm sure Mike is really happy that you're going with AR-15 because Mike has, I think over the past month, Mike has gone from maybe out of 10, a 5 with Anthony Richardson to now maybe like an 8, 7.5, just watching film, talking to other people. And Mike can allude to this himself, but I think Mike is just like, thank you, Danny. You are helping me out because didn't you just drop a piece on Anthony Richardson, Mike, on why the Seahawks should take him at number 5?
I didn't, maybe not why they should, but just why it makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like it does make sense. And yeah, my priors have been confirmed on this show for about the last month. Yeah, Nate Tice on not too long ago confirmed my priors. It's great. Like this pre-draft season has just been confirmed Mike's priors, with the exception of Deontay Lee. Shout out to Deontay, who just broke my heart and just made it very clear that Deion Henley as could be a great linebacker, just does not fit with the Seahawks. So, sadly. And he's right. Well, the more I went back and looked, he's right. God damn it. But yeah, the problem was with AR, I got spooked early because I don't really watch a lot of college football. Right? So I saw some people early on, like when I'm not paying attention, maybe like late December, early January, like I keep hearing the word raw, and then I keep seeing I got a lot of Malik Willis comps early. Yeah. And I was like, well, that's bad. I've seen Malik. Right. we don't. That's not worth the 5th pick. And then I started watching myself, and I was like, oh no. This guy's way better than Malik was. The Malik stuff is just like you're just comparing athletic black guys at this point. So we shouldn't do that. I watch him. I'm like, no. This guy can actually move some safeties with his eyes and then hit a guy down the seam on 3rd and 15, or I forget which game he did that. It's like, oh no. This is a quarterback. So I got scared off. That's why I'm so happy that people who are watching even more than me are like, yeah, no, Mike, your priors are confirmed. Anthony Richardson is a nice fit in Seattle.
I mean, I think, and the things you hear about him, and there's people that compare him to Malik Willis. There's also comps to like Josh Allen and things like that, because and to me, it's like the main thing that you worry about is he's just, and this is a fact, he just is not very experienced. Like he has not thrown that many passes in college. And that to me is usually a huge red flag. And that's, and not a lot of guys that are like 1-year starters in college go on and like do really well in the NFL, or at least not right away. Cause there's just a million things to learn. Like it's like the hardest position in the world to learn how to do that. And so, him starting 13 games, that to me is a huge red flag. But like you were saying, when you're watching the tape, the rawness is more just, I think he's a little bit scattershot at times with his accuracy, but like you do see flashes of like high level quarterback stuff where he's moving around in the pocket. He's trying to stay in the pocket. He's not just bailing at the first hint of pressure. And he's able to throw over the middle of the field from the pocket. He hangs tough. He like throws in the face of pressure, keeps his eyes downfield and not on the rush. Like there's just a lot of things that he, and I would say flashes because he just doesn't have a ton of reps, but like he does really flash those things. And I think the way that Nate put it, that always kind of like resonates with me is like, he tries to do the right thing. He's not just guessing, you know what I mean? And so he understands, I think, how to play quarterback, but he just honestly needs more reps. That's kind of how I look at it. And so, with him, the ceiling is absolutely ludicrous just because he has the physical tools. He has literally maybe the best tools of any quarterback ever, like legitimately. So like, yeah, you want to go for that. You want to try and like develop that guy. And so, and a lot of people are like, well, look at Tom Brady, his physical skills, his physical traits aren't that great. It's like, yeah, but look at Patrick Mahomes, like his right. His arm is absolutely ludicrous. And he's the best quarterback in the NFL because of the things he can do, like out of structure. And, I don't know. So like, to me, there's a middle ground here. Like, yes, we do want traits. It's also very important to be good at quarterback, the position, but right. You do want traits, and the traits give you the ceiling to be an absolute game wrecker, like Josh Allen, like Patrick Mahomes, like Lamar Jackson, things like that. So I do think it is worth shooting for the moon on some of those things.
I don't know if you heard or you probably saw the quote from Pete Carroll on a local radio station earlier this year when he said that the Seahawks can win a Super Bowl with Geno Smith. And based on everything with the quarterback stuff, who they want to draft, how they can get better, would it be the smart move to even take a quarterback this year? Or do you say, you know what? You can still take a quarterback and find gems where, hey, maybe they get cute it works out, Danny. They get cute in the third round and find a gym.
Right.
And he turns out to be a superstar. But based on just hearing what Pete Carroll has said, do you even think it's smart to take a quarterback at 5? Or are you just saying going on defense and build this roster within because you believe in Geno?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that because I think I change my opinion every week. Like truly, when you look at the state of the NFC right now, I'm like, part of me is like, just get a really good defender and like go out and like, go to the playoffs and anything can happen in the playoffs kind of deal. But then I also look at how hard it is to get an elite quarterback and how completely set your franchise is for like 10 years if you get one of those quarterbacks. Look at like the Bengals. Look at, obviously the Bills. The Chiefs are in the NFC, their AFC championship like every year because they have an elite quarterback. And they completely like change out the rest of their roster essentially.
Yep.
They still go back to the playoffs every year because they have that guy. They go to the AFC championship every year because they have that guy. And like those teams are so set up with so flexible because they have that piece that it's a worthwhile gamble to, if you really believe in a guy like Richardson or like Stroud, if he's there or whoever, to do that, even though, there is an opportunity cost of the right now, like obviously that is the thing to consider. But I don't know. To me, it's just like when you look around the NFL, like especially the AFC, these quarterbacks define what happens in any given year. And I do think there's a possibility the Seahawks could win a Super Bowl with Geno Smith. It's also a situation where I think everything has to go exactly right if you're going to win a Super Bowl with him. Not to say he's bad, but like you just have to have everything else go right if you want to contend for a Super Bowl. So I don't know. Obviously, I'm fence sitting. I think they should take a quarterback.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know. It's tough.
I like it.
It's the toughest of all the. I'd have to think about this maybe a little harder, but like of all the teams in the top 10, I do think the Seahawks are at like the biggest like crossroads in that regard. I have to think a little bit. I don't know. Yeah, probably because everyone else is kind of building or just like playing with house money, like Philly is with pick 10.
Yeah,
like everyone else is like, man, I have to decide between playing for the short term or the long term. Essentially, with their top pick, and that's a tough call because if you're the Seahawks, you're like, man, we're not that far away. Whether this is reality or not, I can see them being like, we're not that far away from catching Philly. Right?
Totally.
I know catching Philly versus catching Kansas City doesn't really matter if you catch an AFC team.
Right.
Like, so by the time you make a Super Bowl, you're just playing them already. So like, yeah, you should always try to catch your conference champs. Like, I could see the Seahawks thinking, we're not that far.
Right.
And
that's the counter argument, and that's why like I change my mind every week. It's like. Yeah, actually, that does make a lot of sense. Like you're not playing in the AFC right now. Like there's just not that many elite teams in the NFC, and so like it gives them a chance if they can like get a good defender, get their defense cleaned up, like make a leap on defense. Then they have a real chance to, not be Super Bowl contenders, but like definitely go to playoffs and things like that. And like then anything can kind of happen. I think the Lions are in a very similar situation where they're like their roster is really good, but the quarterback is. There's a cap there with what they could probably do, I think, with Jared Goff. So they're another team that might be like trying to figure out this decision. Like, do we take a quarterback or just like keep building the defense or whatever? So there's just to me, like if you look at the top 10, Seahawks are, one of the most intriguing teams, not just because I'm a homer and like the Seahawks, but like for real, like this could be a turning point for them.
Yeah. And I've talked about this before. It really does come down to like how the typically long-term aspirations of the front office clash with the typically short-term desires of the coaching staff. Usually, the desires can coincide, and they often do with the good organizations. But sometimes, like coaches are like, I need to play good players today, now. Like, give me the best possible 11, 22, 53, whatever. Whereas front office might be like, I hear you. In a couple years, though,
totally,
this guy might be a pro.
And going back, I'm just trying to remember, and you probably remember it better than me, but like along the way, the Seahawks have been interested in quarterbacks and have been considering taking quarterbacks even after they had Russell Wilson. Yeah. But I remember like the famous example is like Andy Dalton going back to whenever it was like 2010 or 2011. I think didn't Pete like Andy Dalton and Schneider didn't, or vice versa maybe.
I think it's flipped. I think
Schneider liked Dalton, Pete said no, and then. Schneider loved Russell Wilson and Pete was like, or I can't remember, whatever it is. Like they have to agree. My main point is like there's been some disagreements between Pete and John, and ultimately the buck stops at Pete. But I think he wants to give John Schneider, latitude to like build this roster and let him do his job. So I think there's a tension there where, especially at this pick, number 5, like they are going, I think if there's any disagreement, they'll just take not a non-quarterback, because that's a huge, huge commitment. And they both, I think, have to be very much in line and see the guy the same way. So we'll see, like maybe they do feel that way about Richardson if he's there, or maybe they do feel that way about Stroud if he's there, or whoever. But yeah, so I think there has to be like a very, like both John and P, I think, have to be huge believers in that guy to take him there. I mean, that's maybe like an obvious statement, but like it is a factor here.
No, it's obvious, but it goes overlooked pre-draft. Post-draft, we tend to hear reports, and when the owner, the GM, and the coach aren't all aligned on like a quarterback or like whoever the top pick was. We've seen that in Miami recently. That was the case with RG3. Like everyone wasn't on board at the same level and like investment in RG3. So that kind of tanked that situation to an extent. There were other issues, but as there always are with the Washington team. But yeah, when everyone isn't on board with who the top pick is, shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
So like that, and we usually don't hear about it after, but thinking about it beforehand too. I think San Francisco just went through a little bit of that. I think they were initially going to take Mac Jones.
Right.
And then I forget who wanted who, but and they ended up obviously taking Trey. Everyone not aligned on that. Anyway, let's stay with offense. I want to talk some pass catchers because that's something we haven't talked about on the show this pre-draft cycle quite yet, just because the defense has been so bad. We've talked about that more often. But all right, so for this exercise, Danny, let's say the Seahawks are like, we're taking a receiver in the first round, non-negotiable. All right, and then it doesn't really matter where, but let's just say they're taking one. They're stuck though. They're stuck between Zay Flowers, Jaxson Smith-Njigba, Jordan Addison, and Quentin Johnston from TCU. And they need your help. Who do you tell the Seahawks to go with and why?
I would go with Jaxson Smith-Njigba of Ohio State. I just think he's the best of that group. And honestly, he would fit what they're trying to do really well. Like with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett out there, like he'd be able to play in the slot, do his thing. Like I think the biggest question for him is for Smith-Njigba is like, can he play outside? Can he be a quote unquote number 1 type receiver? And I think that's a legitimate question. He basically only played in the slot, or like the vast majority, it was like 85-90% of his snaps are in the slot. He doesn't have blazing speed. He's not the biggest guy ever, but I just look at him, he's a technician as a route runner. He's really good against both man and zone. Obviously, he was incredibly, incredibly productive. He had very good testing numbers in terms of his agility. There's just a lot to like here. And to me, he's the most complete, safest receiver in this class. But he also has an incredible upside, too, to be like an elite receiver in my mind. So to me, he'd be the clear-cut favorite by like a lot. And then after that, I'd probably say Jordan Addison, but there's a hair, between Addison and Flowers for me. I go back and forth on it. This is another guy, like another thing that I go back and forth every week on. I think Addison is like, he's more polished as a route runner, and I think is just a little bit more versatile, but he's also very small, like 5'11", 173. Like that scares me a little bit. You know what I mean? And so he's just so slight. How much are we willing to like sort of look past the size thing? At least with Zay Flowers, he got up to like 180 something during this process. He put on some muscle. Like there's at least the ability there to gain weight and things like that. So, but ultimately they're similar style players. I think both undersized speedsters, big play receivers. I think Flowers is a little more big and physical and can run after the catch, whereas Addison is a little more finesse and technical as a route runner. So I think it's very close between those two. And then with Johnston, he's a very fun player, big play guy, yards after the catch, tons of potential there. I think physically he's the most impressive of this group by far, but he's pretty inconsistent, and I just have a hard time like kind of getting there with him all the way, just because he doesn't catch the ball especially well. Like there's some ball security things there. He's not very nuanced as a route runner. There's just a lot and he's a Big 12 receiver. Of course, there's that. So that just is a little bit worrisome, but I don't know. So to me that he's like sort of, I would be excited because of the physical potential is there, but he's still got a lot to like develop, I think, as a receiver in the pro game.
Let's see. What is Jaxson? What did he run in the 40? Oh, 4.52. Oh man.
Nasty. Can't do that.
Yeah.
That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. Think there's like if you look at like some of the elite receivers in the NFL, like they're 4.5 guys all the way.
Yeah, I think Devontae Adams is up there, right? Like 4.5. Let me just look it up.
Devontae Adams 4.5? Oh wow.
Devontae Adams was like in the 4.5s. I know like DeAndre Hopkins was a 4.5s guy. Keenan Allen was famously like 4.6.
Okay. 4.42, but not great. Pretty fast. Devontae was 4.42.
Oh, okay. Well, I was wrong there. I remember him being not quite as,
I thought he was a little slower, which explains his amazing route running.
What did you said 4.4 something? That's 4.4.
It's not blazing, but he's also not slow.
Yeah. I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah, well, Danny, you just confirmed another one of my priors because I've been a big Jaxson Smith-Njigba guy. Mostly starting from the Rose Bowl, he tore up.
Oh my God, yeah. 347 yards or something like that. Like that's absurd.
Yeah, I was watching that game. I even tweeted a little bit during that game, which I don't usually do during college football games. Because I hadn't heard of him at that time. And I was watching the Rose Bowl like everybody else. And after that game, I was doing research on him. I was like, this guy might be the best receiver I've ever seen in my life. Like, what is going on? And then I look it up and I think he broke like a shit ton of records in like Texas in high school. Like he's one of the best high school receivers ever in the state of Texas. So it's like that distinction.
That's important. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you're that, then you're probably going to be good in the league. I know he didn't play much last year, but since then people have had to talk me out of Jaxson Smith-Njigba. Not
Yeah, he was like a legend in high school, like legit legend. I don't have it in front of me. He scored like 30 something touchdowns as a senior. Like he's so like his numbers are absolutely ridiculous. And everything that you hear about him from high school, it's like almost mythical, like mythology. Like he was like a freak of all freaks in high school in terms of like what he was able to do. And then the only year, they played a full year, he like outproduced Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. So like, I don't know, to me, like obviously there's context here and it's important. And he was in their offense running playing a role that would like be high volume and everything. And I get that. But at the same time, man, he's just like, number one, I love his tape. I think he can move, he can create separation. He's really, really nuanced in the way that he gets open, catches the ball, right off the catch. And his production is just ludicrous. So like, what's not to like? I guess it is important to note that he did miss most of last year with a hamstring injury. So there's that. But at the same time, I still just think he's a really good player. And I like him by far the most of the receivers in this class.
All right, let's see. Let's do a different exercise. Let's say now in this one, they took defense in the first round with both their picks. But now they're like, all right, now we have to take a guy, a pass catcher, or specifically a receiver on day 2. Doesn't really matter which round. Like, all right, we got to take one on day 2. Let's assume those 4 are gone. They all 4 go. Quentin, Jordan, Jaxson, and Zay. They all go in the first round to whoever. Who are you pounding the table on pounding the table for in day 2 as a receiver?
I like a couple different guys in this area. I mean, honestly, like the day 2 receivers, all of them are pretty exciting for their own particular reasons. But I really like Josh Downs from North Carolina. He is like he's a slot only type receiver. So he's undersized, but he plays pretty big, really shifty. He's kind of like, I think he would be a good complement to what they have with Lockett and DK. So I think he's an interesting one. Marvin Mims is sort of a personal favorite of mine. He's a field stretcher. He's another Texas high school legend. In fact, I think he holds records for the most yards in his high school career. Jeez. And he was like Mr. Texas football as a senior in high school. Like just, again, legendary mythical figure in Texas football. So Marvin Mims, and he's another smaller guy, which is like the kind of the story of this class, but like he's really fast. He's very fast, explosive off his first step or whatever. He can kind of just dictate with that explosive acceleration. He can play outside and inside. He played primarily on the outside this last year and then mostly in the slot the year before. So he can kind of do whatever you ask him to do, which I think is another good, reason to grab him because he can kind of complement DK and Lockett. And so he's another guy that I really like, big play guy. And then, Cedric Tillman from Tennessee, kind of a big possession receiver that they could utilize over the middle of the field. I think A.T. Perry another big play guy. Jaden Reed from Michigan State is another one of my favorites. You were at the Senior Bowl. Like, he was really impressive to me at the Senior Bowl. Kind of forgot about him a little bit in 2022 because his offense was atrocious. But I was actually going back and watching him in 2021, and that was the Kenneth Walker team, and which made me just realize how good Kenneth Walker was too. Like, Kenneth Walker, oh my God, turning on some of the tape from 2021, I was like, this guy is ridiculously good. It also makes me think this running back class is not nearly as good as I was thinking it was just watching Kenneth Walker run the year before. But yeah, Jaden Reed, I think, is like, the Seahawks would probably really like him. I actually comped him to Tyler Lockett, except for the fact that he gets yards after the catch, whereas Tyler Lockett does not do that by choice anymore. Kind of an intentional decision, which I respect. But yeah, Jaden Reed, he's a little bit bigger. He's still small, but he's bigger than some of these other guys, 5'11", 187. So he's a little bit thicker than some of these like really, really slight guys in this class. He's explosive, can get deep, can play on the outside and the inside. He's got return game experience. I just like him a lot. So he's another guy that I would say I'd be very excited if they picked him on day 2.
So I looked up the Marvin Mims cat because you mentioned him being a legend in Texas. First thing that came up is that he went to Oklahoma. So I was like, who fucked up there? Someone didn't cut the check.
Yeah, but CD and Hollywood Brown coming out of Oklahoma, I think there was a little bit of like, I think there was a little bit of hype there for like Oklahoma receivers.
He initially committed to Stanford. Fascinating. And decommitted.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, did not. This is all from Dane Brugler's The Beast.
Yeah,
which is just like incredible. We'll have Dane on after the draft.
Yeah,
but yeah, in Mims' senior season, he had 114 catches, and this is in high school. 114 catches, 31 touchdowns, and set the state record for receiving yards in a season.
31.
626 yards. 600 yards in a high school season. Jesus Christ. Yes, he was Mr. Football in Texas and an All-American.
Yeah.
Wow. Holy hell. And he was only the number 29 receiver in his recruiting class.
What it was like, maybe the size thing or something. I didn't like, I don't follow high school recruiting that closely, but to me, I'm always like, man, if you're Mr. Football in Texas, like 5-star, like, I don't care. That's all I need to see.
Yeah. There's a few states where if you're Mr. Football and insert state here, 5-star, I'm backing up the Brinks truck or the NIL truck to get you. If you had to pick a favorite out, though, so real quick, just give us the name of it. All the guys you named day 2. Who are you? Like, you're up on the table, shirt off, waving it like, Pete, take this guy. Whose name are you screaming in the draft?
Shirt off. I guess Mims. Mims probably be my personal favorite. I'd be very excited for Josh Downs too, though.
One player stood out to me when you said it and you explained a little bit of his game, and that's Cedric Tillman out of Tennessee. The player comp that I came up with immediately was when the Seahawks in 2019 had Josh Gordon. He was huge on third downs. I think he only had 11 catches, but he was always thrown in the game on third and something, and Josh Gordon would have a catch. Is that similar to how you would think Cedric could fit with the Seahawks, where he's just a big target on third down when maybe DK and Lockett are being doubled, or just allow the coverages forced their way and he comes up big? Is that something you would see with Tillman?
Yeah, definitely. I think he's really good at using his frame and his size and he's got really strong hands at the catch point. So I think, on third downs, like when they really need to get like a 3rd and 6, 3rd and 5, like he'd be the type of player to come in and be a factor on slants and things like that. Also good in the red zone. He's got good awareness of like where the sideline is, all that stuff. Like he's just a really solid possession receiver. I think like he's not the most explosive guy, but he's just really, sort of reliable and big and strong and got enough speed to like threaten the defense deep. He was coming into the season. He was supposed to be Tennessee's like big star receiver. And then of course, Jalen Hyatt blew up and got the Litnikoff award and went absolutely like nuclear on the season. But part of that was because Tillman had, I think, a high ankle sprain. He had to do the tightrope surgery thing to like come back, and came back and he wasn't quite himself. But still a very solid, good player, big, tough guy. I comped him to Cortland Sutton. And they're like similar athletically. I think stylistically, they're pretty similar. Sutton's kind of fallen off the last couple of years because of injuries and things like that. But early in his career, he was really exciting, sort of ascending star. So I could see Tillman kind of being that style of player.
Nice. Okay.
Wow, man. I'm looking just randomly while you were talking about these guys. I'm like looking up some of the random facts and Dane's draft guide. This is just amazing stuff. Apparently, this Mims dude ran 4.38. That's not like a random fact, but
oh yeah, he's fast. His 10-yard split 1.50, which is really fast. Super explosive. Like I heard the expression, he can beat guys off the dribble, and I just think that's like perfect for Marvin Mims. You know what I mean? Just like the first 2 steps, and he's just downfield. And so, yeah, that he's just like one of like quote unquote my guys. I don't know how early he'll get drafted. He's probably gonna be like a 3rd rounder or something like that, but wouldn't surprise me if he went a little earlier.
All right, this is the last one of our pass catcher exercises. Let's say now we're still on day 2. They're like, all right, guys, we have to take a tight end. This class is too deep. There's too many different flavors. Everyone, Will Dissly's hurt. Noah Fant's on an expiring deal. Colby Parkinson's on an expiring deal. We need a guy for the long term. They say, Danny, please help us. We need a tight end. Who do you like as the best fit for Seattle out of this group, particularly on day 2?
That's a really good question. So fit-wise, I would say a few people come to mind. Obviously, if Michael Mayer somehow falls to day 2, he'd be Seahawks through and through. Like, I think there's a small chance he falls to day 2. He's probably more likely going to be 1st rounder. But he's the type of guy that he can play. He's not going to betray, whether it's a run or a pass. There's not going to be like tendency stuff with him just because he's a good blocker and run game. He can do all that stuff. But he's the type of guy I could see them liking. Same with Darnell Washington from Georgia, just because he's a really good run blocker and he can get him out in space and like the screen game, and he just like takes people out in the screen game, which I would love to see. I would love to Seahawks to have like a screen game for the first time in my life. Like I would draft Darnell Washington in the 1st round just so they could run screens. Like just give me one successful screen in 2023, and that's worth drafting him in the 1st round.
At least you haven't given up on it, Danny. So that's okay. So, Mike is done.
I've been like bitching and moaning about it for years, and then I saw, and I apologize, I don't remember who tweeted it, but it was like basically a graph of like success rate on screens or something, and like the Seahawks were just like so far down in the left corner, like in the worst quadrant, the bad quadrant of like success rate and like yards per attempt or whatever. It was like they were like 3 standard deviations away from the rest of the NFL. Like they cannot run a screen to save their freaking lives. It drives me insane. So anyways, yeah, Darnell Washington, run a screen and that would actually work. But I think realistically, I think they would like Luke Musgrave. He's very athletic. He puts in a lot of effort in the run game. He's like an ascending player. He's just been hurt like the last 2 years. And so I guess there's just not a lot of tape out there on him. And so that's a little bit concerning. He could fall, but he's very athletic. He's like a multi-sport guy. I know Pete loves that. He was like a alpine skiing champion as a high schooler. He played lacrosse, like all that stuff. Like Pete's going to love that kind of thing. And then Tucker Kraft out of South Dakota State's another guy I could see them really liking. Another combo tight end kind of guy that can block and be utilized in the passing game. I comped him to Hunter Henry. I think he's like in that mold of like a big, physical, tough Y tight end. I don't know. Do you think they would want like a move tight end? It doesn't really feel like their style to like get a guy who's just going to not be much of a blocker.
Hey, if they take Jimmy Graham there, and he's
true,
they definitely would take a look. Obviously,
they tried to turn him into a blocker though, which was just, I mean, come on,
didn't work.
Hopefully they learned that lesson.
Bingo.
Yeah, I gotta find my tweet where I replied to someone, not Jimmy.
Oh yeah,
I replied to someone about Jimmy, and I was like, having Jimmy was like, I think I stole this analogy from someone. I was like, you're having a Corvette but leaving it in the garage or something like that. Yeah. And Jimmy found the tweet and liked it.
Searching his name, loving it.
Yeah, it was so weird because like I only covered the Seahawks for 1 year. It was Jimmy's final year, so it's like he didn't really get to know me, So it was very weird. He was definitely deep in the search my name bag of Twitter, which is a dangerous space to be in. But if you had to pick one of those guys you just named, Danny, you're on the clock. There's 10 seconds left at the buzzer. What name? Again, shirt off again. Shirt still off in the draft room. You're waving it. Who are you going with?
Shirt off, Darnell Washington. if we're talking the 2nd round, I think that's a great value, and I'd just be excited about what they could do with, like I said, like maybe they could run a screen, because he gets out in space and he's just like engulfing dudes. I think there's a legit possibility he lasts into the 2nd round. He's got 1st round traits because he's big, he's outlier size. Like he has a 7'3" wingspan or something ridiculous. Like he's just like got a huge frame. But he's also pretty athletic and he's an ascending pass catcher. I don't think he's never going to be a high volume pass catcher, but the way that they could utilize him as a blocker in the red zone, and I think he just fit what they want to do. So I'd be pretty excited about that.
I was trying to find the tweet, Mike, of you referencing Jimmy Graham. I can't find it, but maybe you'll find it.
I'll find it. Go ahead, move to the next one, and I'll find it.
I remember it though. That was a great tweet. But I do want to spin things and look at on the defensive front and what the Seahawks got to do there. But I also want to give a shout out to your draft guide because I like it a lot, Danny. It's different than everyone else's. And what I mean by different is, one example, you break down Bryce Young, and then you have the player comp, which I love the most about how you do player comps is it's not just football. You might throw in basketball. So in this example with Bryce Young, you say shades of Fran Tarkenton meeting Jason Kidd. Like that is just I like it. I love it. That separates you from everyone.
Yeah.
Exactly. I can picture it. Shout out to Jason Kidd. No relation, but we share the same last name. So that's cool.
I didn't put that together till
But with all that being said, Will Anderson, when you look at your big board, you have him number 1 prospect. So the simple question is, why do you have Will Anderson as your number 1 guy?
I think just in terms of the big picture, he seems like a very both high floor and high ceiling type of prospect. I don't necessarily know if he's like in the stratosphere as like, Myles Garrett or Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, any of those guys where in terms of like you're 100% sure he's going to be a superstar in the league. However, the combination of production, traits, his size, the role he's going to play, everything you hear about him as like a person, like a worker, as the character of him is a very strong. Everything that you hear about him is like he's a top-notch dude who had ludicrous production in college, plays a premium position, and I think is a type of guy that you could plug in right away and like at least play a role in a rotation as a pass rusher, and then kind of develop from there and end up being like a high level player. He may not have the type of bend. I think that's like the one concern is he's not like the bendiest athlete. He's a little bit stiff to be like a superstar type pass rusher. But I do think he has the upside to be like a double-digit sack guy, like in the NFL. And he's going to rack up tackles for losses and things like that. So I just think the level of confidence that he'll be at least a good, solid, like long-time starter for you is high for me. And so that's the reason I've got him number 1. This is the class that doesn't have a lot of blue chip players in my mind. There's just everybody that you go down the list is like major question marks. And he's the one guy who I don't have a ton of questions about.
I think we can all agree that the biggest need for the Seahawks defense right now is that line, defensive line that is. And
yeah,
Jalen Carter, he's still someone that could potentially be on the Seahawks radar.
Yep.
And in that scenario, with everything going around him, telling teams if you're not in the top 10, we're not chopping it up, to the whole incident that happened, which, unfortunately lives were lost. Would you still take him at number 5, or is you're kind of thinking, you know what, we can get someone else and build this defensive line?
Yeah, that's a very tough question to answer from the outside looking in, because there were question marks and sort of rumors and whispers that there were some character concerns with him even before that incident that happened with the car crash and the 2 people that died in that car crash that may have been due to racing and all that. There was already question marks. I think like in the rumors were it's just like, oh, you got to push him really hard at practice. He's not like a self-starter necessarily, but at the same time he goes into games and just wrecks shop. So like how worried are you really about that? It's like, what I mean? He's like a 20-year-old kid. Like, like a lot of guys are going to be sort of maybe just word is like immature or something like that. So I think there's that. And then, but to me, the bigger worry was like, he's got this arrest. He had to go down. He had to leave the combine, come back. He comes back to his pro day. He's like gained 9 pounds between the combine and his pro day, which is not a very long time, like a period of like 2 weeks or something like that. It's just like, to me, the red flags are starting to stack up a little bit with him. In addition to the fact that he plays defensive tackle, which is not necessarily considered a premium position. So or at least I think it's easier to sort of replace those guys on the inside, unless he's like a, Aaron Donald style player. If we think he's that guy, if you think he's, Fletcher Cox or Jeffrey Simmons or whoever, then I think he's worth taking right there. But to me, the red flags have started to stack up a little bit here that would make me a little bit worried to make him that number 5 pick. But that being said, I think he's still going to go top 10, and that's why they're not meeting with teams outside the top 10.
Which is such a bold. I love that strategy from Drew Rosenhaus.
Right. What about teams that want to trade up?
It's come under fire a little bit for reasons like that, but I'm just like, you know what? Screw it. I just like that energy. They don't
want to go through the motions and like travel and all that bull. It's like kind of makes sense. I get it.
Yeah, I like it. Two things. I tried to find my Jimmy Graham tweet.
Look.
By doing two things really quick I was trying to multitask. I searched my Twitter name and the word Jimmy and figured,
bro, I did the same thing.
I couldn't have tweeted Jimmy that often. I was wrong there. Apparently,
lots of Jimmy tweets.
Yeah. I tweeted about Jimmy G quite a bit, which also reminded me that last year it was like a thing where the Seahawks was like, "Oh, Mike, are the Seahawks going to trade for Jimmy G?" That was a thing last summer. I completely forgot about. I'm glad that I didn't get like old takes exposed. I was making it very clear that would be bad if they do that. The second thing I tried by searching my name and the word Graham, and I learned how often I used to tweet about graham crackers. I still cannot find the Jimmy Graham tweet. And also have learned that I used to debate with people whether graham crackers are crackers.
Wow.
Or crackers or cookies, I guess, which is, now that we're not going to get into it here, but now I think about it, that is worth a debate. I just didn't realize how often I was doing that on the internet. So all of that, find the tweet.
I even looked up the word and your @ name with garage, Mike. Nothing.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I don't even know what I learned.
What's Jimmy Graham's handle? Did you tag him?
I didn't tag him. I'm a big no tag players guy.
Yeah.
I do not tag players unless I have like a relationship with the player and I'm like poking fun at the player or something like that. But otherwise, I usually do not, whether it's good or bad. Yeah. Or I'm complimenting them, posting film. I usually just I'm not a big fan of that. I hate when people then reply to me and then tag the player. It's like, you snitch, get away from
snitch tagging is the worst. It's the lowest level of tweeting.
Yeah, come on, man. It's like I know their @ thing. If I wanted to tag them, I would have. Yeah, I would have tagged them. And I also, it's a little arrogance on my side. I feel like I have a big enough platform. It's like if the tweet is important enough, they will see it.
Right.
Usually, whether it's their mom, their trainer, their coach, whatever, my tweets will get to that player if it's a Seahawk player. Anyway, I'm going to go back to the defensive line. The Jalen Carter thing is just when we talked about the short-term versus long-term decision they have to make kind of with the quarterbacks at the center of that. Jalen Carter's right in that too. There's some really tough decisions for the Seahawks here with this 5th pick. The 5th pick is a blessing. It's great. Thank you, Russell Wilson. But it's whew. It's such a pivot point,
right?
In so many ways, and Jalen is right at the front of that. Because you pop on some Jalen tape, and it's like, you know what? I'll take the guy as long as he himself is not in jail. I'll take him, and even then, if he was, as long as he can get out on Sundays, still might take him.
Right?
Still might, because he's so much of a need. But let's see. Let's say they don't take him. I'm doing the exercise for you. A guy that we haven't had really anyone talk about on the podcast yet in this draft cycle, who's on the D line, is Kalijah Kancey from. I get the last name right? I know it's Kalijah.
Kalijah Kancey, yeah.
Yeah, from Pitt. I'm not a big fan, but I admittedly don't know a ton. The size thing does worry me a little bit. I think 6'1", 281. He's 36th ranked prospect on your big board though, so sell me on him a little bit. Could that make some sense there? Maybe late first round or something like that?
I mean, to me, he's more of a second round player just because I don't know. It's tough because on one hand, there's going to be probably 50 players that teams have ranked from. You hear it every year. There's probably 15 first round grades, right? Mm-hmm. And then from there on, from 15 to 50, probably you could have guys with similar grades. And so I guess it's a little bit meaningless to say, oh, he's an early second round versus a late first round, whatever. But at the same time, to me, he's more of a second round target for me, just because there's some major concerns about, he's another outlier. Not only is he small, he's 280 pounds, 6'1", but he has historically short arms, which is always a concern when you're playing defensive line on the interior. it's just because number one, like if you don't have the reach to keep guys off your body, like if you let opponents into your chest, they're going to like dominate that rep. And so that is a reason that typically speaking, like length is so important for defensive linemen. That's why, length is so important for offensive linemen. Mm-hmm. And so, he is so quick and so explosive off the first step, it may not end up mattering long-term. But at the same time, he is an outlier because of that. In addition to the fact he's 6'1" or 6 foot or whatever, like he's short and short arms. And so you're kind of double dipping on the outlierness of him. And so that makes me a little bit nervous, even though he is like a very good player. In the first round, I think you got to have, to me, you got to go with guys with like elite traits a little bit more. And so that would make me a little bit nervous to take him in the first round, but he is getting mocked in the first round quite a bit. And so, he is the type of player that could come in on sub downs. I don't know if he's a 3-down player necessarily in the NFL, but provide a little juice to the interior pass rush group and kind of do that. But there's a couple other guys I think I'd prefer over him for the Seahawks in particular, just because, like I said, the short, he's short and he's short arms. That just like worries me a little bit. I actually moved him down in my next update. I haven't published it yet, but it's scaring me off a little bit.
I can see. I love the relative athletic score website. Is super great. The color coding of it is like also like really like satisfying.
Totally.
For me, like it just jumps out. Like whoever designed those, whoever thought of that element is just a great. And you go to a guy like Kalijah's page, for example, where it's like all of this green on all of the testing composites. Yep. He ran a 4.6, which is great at 281.
That's standing. Yeah.
Like his vert 33.5. Like, come on, like that's crazy for that at that weight. Short shuttle stuff was all great. Like it's green everywhere, and then you get to the size, and it's just awful. Like it's just this big splash of red at 6'1", 281, and then there's some other guys like. If you guys are ever bored on the relative athletic score site, just pick your favorite player who's in the league now. Just go look at his page. It'll be surprising. Yeah. Some of them are like obviously green as hell. And then you're like, we were talking about Devontae Adams earlier. I looked it up. His looks awful.
Yeah.
Red and orange. Orange is like average or whatever. It's like red and orange all over the place on Devontae Adams. And he's like maybe the best receiver in the league. So let's stay with D-line though, because you did mention some other guys that you like more. Are any of these names guys you like more? Mozzie Smith, Siaki Ika, or Keeanu Benton? Those are all the Seahawks man-to-man stamp of approval defensive tackles. Are we missing any? Is there anyone else that you like that's not among that group maybe for Seattle?
Yeah, Benton was a guy that I kind of came to late in the process. He was one of those players that was really standing out at the Senior Bowl. And the more that I dug into him and when I wrote him up for the guide, like I got more and more convinced that this guy is going to be a steal in the second round. If you actually, I did the head-to-head comparison with him and Jalen Carter actually, and the number of snaps that they've played and like their overall stats are like pretty much identical across the board. Obviously, I'm not saying they're the same player, but he's essentially the off-brand version of Jalen Carter. I think the Seahawks could take kind of the Kirkland brand, if you will. And I'd be very excited if they got him in the second round, just because he's extremely explosive off the first step. Like he has an incredibly effective club move that leaves dudes just like lunging. Like offensive line will come out of their stance, like trying to be like play with power and stuff and just go like fall down. They'll just go lunging because he's got a really effective club move. He kind of pairs it with a swim move and a rip move. And he's really good at getting guys flailing and shooting into the backfield. So he's the type of player I think that, could come in and contribute right away. I actually comped him to Jaron Reed. I don't know how accurate that is, but like size-wise, they're pretty similar. And I think Jaron Reed was a second rounder, and I think that Benton will probably end up being a second rounder too. But he's got length. He's got that first step explosiveness. I think he can play on all three downs. He is one of my favorites in that area just because he offers a little bit of pass rush upside too.
Linebacker room. They did add some players. Devin Bush, cool. Bobby Wagner's back, excellent. But the unfortunate news is Jordan Brooks will probably not be returning. I'm not going to try to guess. He won't be back for the start of the season is my best guess. And in that scenario, the next guy will be John Radigan, which he hasn't really played at all. So this is a new role for him. In that scenario, the draft is a great opportunity to get some guys. And two guys that I've heard names, and maybe you have two, I'm going to throw them to you. I want you to pick either or maybe you pick both of them. Maybe somehow the Seahawks can get both of these dudes, which probably won't happen. But you have Arkansas's linebacker Drew Sanders or Clemson's Trenton Simpson.
Yeah.
Who do you like to fit what the Seahawks are trying to do with the new 3-4 scheme moving forward? Learn from Bobby.
Yeah.
How does this work out? Who do you like and why?
I think Drew Sanders would be a little bit more intriguing to me. Both of those guys are kind of fascinating because with Trenton Simpson, he's just absolutely bonkers athletic. Like, and I know that the Seahawks tend to like that at their linebacker position in particular. His range, his explosiveness, the way that he flies around like a heat-seeking missile. Like, there's definitely a lot of things to like with him. But he worries me a little bit because he's sort of a player without a position. He's not really a linebacker, and he's not really a pass rusher. He's kind of in the Jamal Adams mode, where it's like we got to figure out where this guy's going to play type of deal. So that makes me a little bit worried. But I think you could also say the same about Drew Sanders. But to me, Drew Sanders, his upside is a lot more intriguing just because he has an actual potential to be like a stand-up rusher off the edge, and he did that at Alabama before he transferred to Arkansas, and he showed some traits there. I think he's just got like he's taller, he's got a bigger frame, a little bit more versatility, and like I said, he could come in and sort of be a guy that could come in and like be a rusher off the edge on third downs if they want to get another guy in the rotation. His upside as sort of a player that can wear a couple different hats for a defense and do it well, I think is intriguing to me. So I like both of those guys, honestly, but Sanders to me has a little bit higher upside just because of that pass rush ability.
Well, if they draft him, Danny gets all the credit. You hear that, ladies and gentlemen? All of it.
Well, the Simpson, that I get a little worried. Not worried is probably not the word. But it does seem like he fits whatever the Arizona Cardinals are trying to do over there. It feels like I feel like they had like 4 drafts in a row where they were just like, we don't care if you have a position.
Totally.
just come play on our defense, and we'll just play chaos ball for a little bit. And it didn't work. But although they had it worked a little bit, and then it just like eventually was like, this is not sustainable.
Right.
Like it'd help if guys know where the hell they're going to play, whether they're second level guy on the line of scrimmage, whatever the hell. And that would worry me a little bit. And just like, how do you find a fit, which is not even the player's fault.
Right. Well, part of my defense because I was really high on and I'm blanking on his name.
Isaiah Simmons?
Yeah, Isaiah Simmons. I was super high on him, but I think part of the deal is like when he got into the NFL, they tried to have him be like a different position every year of his career so far. And there's been like all these changes, with the team. And I don't know. I just think like that kind of situation we want to try and avoid and the Seahawks honestly haven't had the best track record in terms of like having a plan for these guys when they come in. And so like it would make me a little bit worried. But I think you could say the same things about Drew Sanders too, because he's sort of a tweener also. And so, but they're just like stylistically very different tweeners. I like the idea that Sanders could come in and like be like a rusher, a stand-up rusher. And like he has the size and frame to do it. Whereas Simpson is, I guess, more in the Jamal Adams mold where he'd be like a blitzing pass rusher rather than like an actual pass rusher, if that makes sense. And so I think that's why I would lean Sanders in this scenario.
In that scenario, based on those two, are there any other? Is there another guy that actually fits the linebacker spot that isn't just a freak athlete, but can actually come in and play linebacker and say, you know what, that is his role.
Yeah,
love him there. Is there a player that screams at you that can do that, or not really in this draft?
In this class, not really, honestly.
Okay.
I don't love the linebacker class. Like it's every linebacker is like there's some interesting traits about them, but there's big like a butt, like he's this, that, or the other. You know what I mean? Like Henry To'oTo'o from Alabama, he's very instinctive, but he's like undersized and not very strong and doesn't take on blocks. And like there's major concerns there.
Those are big concerns.
Yeah, I mean, like that's like what you need in the NFL. Like it's tough. I think Henley from Wazoo, extremely exciting, like physical talent, but he's clearly still sort of learning the position. I think when you watch him,
choose your words wisely. You see that hat?
No, it's okay. I've faced the facts. It's all right.
And then going further down the line, like DeMarvion Overshown from Texas, he kind of Seahawky. he's explosive. He hits hard, flies downhill. Big hitter. I think I could see them liking him, but that he's probably more like a day 3 guy, early day 3. And I don't know if he'd necessarily be like a starter for them. Owen Papo from Auburn, another guy that's pretty interesting to me, just because he's a elite athlete, former 5-star guy, but there's concerns with his awareness and his instincts and coverage. I think the same deal with all these linebackers is like there's always a big but that happens with everything you say.
Understandable.
Just found the tweet.
Nice.
Yes. I did some research. I
How
found
did you
it.
find Jimmy Graham? Jimmy Graham's tagged in this tweet. That's how he found it.
You tagged him.
No. So, okay. Here's what happens. We talked about him on a podcast, and then my cousin actually responds to me and tags Jimmy. And yeah, he says Jimmy was misused. And I respond to my cousin, and by responding to my cousin, Jimmy is then tagged in the response. So yeah, that's what happened. And then my line was they picked up a Ferrari just to drive the speed limit.
That's good.
And then Jimmy liked that tweet. There we go. Wow, good pull, Chris.
Hey man, I was like, you know what? I haven't searched Jimmy Graham and Mike Dugar. I'm sure it might come up there. And sure enough, the second tweet down, there it is.
Yeah, okay. So I gotta apologize to Jimmy there. He was not Twitter searching his name. He was tagged.
Oh, there we go.
By me. No, not by me, by my cousin. But I get why I would have popped up on his phone. I'm also verified, so he could have that setting on there. But he agreed with my sentiment.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, which is the important part there. Yeah, they picked up a Ferrari just to. Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense to me. What? Let's go back. Let's go back and talk about this, because I'm just like, why would you trade a 1st-round pick for a guy that's like literally a wide receiver? He tried to sue the NFL or his team to like make him wide receiver with franchise tag, and then they try and turn him into a freaking inline blocker. Like what? Where's the logic there? What's happening?
We have to ask Pete Carroll.
It just makes no sense to me.
Yeah, that's. It's funny. This is not really totally related to that. I do think of that like Seahawk time period though, when people like credit the Rams with being the first one to just like punt on 1st-round picks in the name of players. And like, did we just forget that the Jimmy Graham trade, the Percy Harvin trade, like, the Seahawks were on that first, or maybe not first, but certainly before the Rams. I don't know enough about NFL history to know if anyone was before the Seahawks on that, but they were definitely before the Rams, and it kind of didn't work too.
No.
So it's tough. I see why the Rams and other teams are like, fuck them picks.
Yeah.
It's like, when you do that, the guy you trade for has to stay healthy. That's the real risk you're taking there. When you look at like Jalen Ramsey's been kind of fine, Laramie Tunsil's been fine for the Texans. I think I don't know about Khalil Mack. He was another 2 1st-round picks guy. Like if that guy gets hurt, like Jamal has with the Seahawks, just looks, even if your process was good, you look kind of screwed.
I think they've also just had a lot of really bad luck. Like with 1st-round picks in general, they just had bad luck, like the injuries situation. Like the Jimmy Graham, like they clearly didn't have a good plan for him, but like you also have to remember he tore his patellar, which is like a career-ending injury for a lot of guys. And that was sort of when he was starting to really get some momentum and start to be like a bigger part of their offense. Like I think he either caught a touchdown on the play where he tore his patellar, or he like had it and then he tore his patellar and he dropped it. But it was like they were starting to figure out how to use him.
It was turning around. It was looking good. I remember that. I was thinking, damn, this might be a problem. And then he gets hurt.
Yeah. And then it was just like all bets are off with that. He was out for like a full year plus, and then probably was never the same after that,
Yeah, it's been tough for Seattle. Just where its use of its top picks, whether by trade or by the selection itself, has just like the luck has not been. Yeah. I even think like Bruce is like a quote unquote hit, I guess, in that regard.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I forget what story I was working on. Maybe just last year working on how their native 1st-round picks have gone. I had forgotten that they traded that pick.
So they traded back, right? Yeah.
They traded back from 12 to 15, and then the 12th pick ended up being Fletcher Cox. So like Bruce in a vacuum is a fine 15th overall pick or whatever, but it's like, well, you missed out on Fletcher Cox to do it. And I forget what they picked up in the trade. And
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either. But like,
maybe it wasn't the pick that they got for they got Bobby with, was it?
Oh, I don't think so. Now we're just like deep into just like Seahawks draft.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say like that draft is such a good microcosm for the Seahawks of the last decade, really, or decade plus. Is they trade back in the first round to pick a undersized, speed rusher that hadn't really done a whole lot in college in Bruce Irvin, and that didn't work out. But then they got Bobby Wagner in the second and Russell Wilson in the third, so it didn't matter.
Right.
So they're getting too cute, getting weird in the first round, and then like finding these gems in the second and third and fourth or whatever. It's like that's the story of the Seahawks. The last 10, 15. This is their 14th draft, which I think is wild.
Nuts.
I was like talking to someone the other day. I was like, "What is this? Like their 10th one?" And I'm like, "14th? What the hell? That's not right. That can't be right."
And there's their top picks, like from LJ, even Jordan, Rashad, D. I think Frank might have been their top pick one year.
Yeah, I think he was 19, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2015. I think Frank was their top pick, like pick 63 or something like that. And then D, Malik McDowell. Like there's just been there's just no normal. And Charles Cross, fingers crossed.
Don't say his name. Don't even think of it. Don't even think it. We don't want to jinx anything.
I also have, let's see. Okay, so they traded back and in the 2012 draft, and they picked up a 4th round pick that they used on Jay Howard, whoever that is, and Jeremy Lane. They picked up.
I mean, he was pretty solid for them for a year or two.
And I think I would just rather have Fletcher Cox.
Well, that's like the don't get cute thing. And it was weird because like I remember during that draft, now we're just like waxing, like having memories, but like I remember hearing he was like their guy in the like the day before the draft. I was like, oh, they want Fletcher Cox, and then he was like sitting there and they didn't take him. So kind of weird.
Weird indeed. But we've been talking about getting cute. All right, we might as well get to it right now. Last year in the draft, solid, did good. Like what we see from Charles Cross, even though you said don't mention his name. Sorry, I did. He panned out, I think, the rookie year. Mm-hmm. How confident are you this year, Danny, that the Seahawks can have some success and get some really good glue guys to bring this team back to, I don't know, a deep playoff run and potentially a Super Bowl?
How confident am I? Well, I'll say this. It helps to have the picks that they have. They have a lot of picks. So that helps a lot. I still think like the draft is honestly just a lot of luck. It really is. I think obviously, there's a lot of work that goes into it and there's a lot of,
is it like Russian roulette or another?
Right. I think, I'm not saying that they're bad at their jobs. I just think it's just extremely difficult to like predict what a 21, 22-year-old person is going to do the next 5-6 years, like in anything. And so it's just a very difficult thing to do, but it helps that they have these picks. It helps that they've got a lot. They have like, how many is it in the top 95? Like 5 or 6 picks in the top 95.
5 picks they have 5, 20, 37, 52, and 83.
Yeah. And so like, to me, that's awesome. There's a chance here to get 2 or 3 good starters. And that would be a huge impact for them. But like, if we're being totally honest, like, the last 10 years, the track record has not been strong. And so I think, this last year, they really hit it out of the park with a lot of these picks. That probably feels more like the outlier than the norm, but they have the ammunition to do really well in this draft. And again, as long as they don't get cute with it and don't overthink it.
Yeah. I'm trying not to be the Debbie Downer of like pre-draft season. Or last year, I just tried to like enjoy the ride. But I did kind of want to caution people during the year about like using the 2022 draft class as like the example that the Seahawks have this nailed all of a sudden.
Right.
Particularly because it's coming off the heels of arguably their worst draft class in 2021. Right? Like that was just 12 months later.
Yeah.
And it speaks to how random the draft is. And not even just the class of 2021, which has some talented guys. It's the class with Stone, Trey Brown, and D. Eskridge. That's a class. But then also look at like why they only had 3 picks. The Jamal trade is one. Forget the other trade.
Wasn't Dwayne Brown part of that? I think they got him for a second, or I could be thinking this is like not further enough back.
Yeah, Dwayne Brown was like that.
Gabe Jaxson, maybe they traded for vets.
Why they didn't have a 5th? I forget why they didn't have a 3rd. Yeah, I forget. Oh no, Jamal as well. That's what it was.
Great.
So because of the Jamal trade, they didn't have a 1st, they didn't have a 3rd, and then the Gabe Jaxson trade, they didn't have a 5th. And that it kind of is what it is. But like you look at that haul, versus the 2022 haul, and back in 12-month spans, it's largely the same staff. It's like that speaks to like, guys, this shit is random. Like no one's like the ultimate mad scientist to get this shit right. You need guys to stay healthy. You need there to be guys in the draft at positions you need in the areas in which you can take them. Like right now, the Seahawks' biggest need is like inside linebacker, but they have like the 5th pick. Well, that doesn't fucking help.
Right.
You're not just going to take Drew Sanders at pick 5 because you need a guy. But last year was a great tackle class. They needed a tackle. They had pick 9. It just kind of fell in the place.
And it fell right exactly for them too, right? Like,
yeah, that doesn't happen every year, particularly at the top of the draft. They got screwed some in the top of the draft some other years. Like I'm pretty sure they would have took Derwin James in whatever year Derwin James was drafted. I think he goes like 1 pick before them.
Yeah.
And they end up trading back. The pick they trade back with, I think, becomes J.R. Alexander, and they end up taking Rashad Penny at 27.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, but what if Gus Bradley doesn't work for the Chargers and they don't take Derwin James? Like, oh, then you have like the Cam Chancellor successor or something like that, instead of having to trade all of these picks for safeties, because like because of their safety, I'm going on a little bit of a ramble, but I'm gonna stop after this. Look at the safety picks they've had to make since Cam and Earl, because they didn't hit on some of the ones they made. They had to trade 2 firsts, a 3rd, and a 5th to get Quandre and Jamal. And
plus they used a 2nd on Marquise Blair, right?
Yeah, and the 2nd on Marquise Blair, like a 4th on Tedrick Thompson, like the safety.
Delano Hill.
Yeah. Like the
Leno now, Danny.
Sorry, that's right.
That's right. It is Leno. The safety resource allocation, like so how much of that could have just been like avoided a little bit if like just 1 pick goes their way. It's like you just get Derwin. So
and I think so. Like I always look at it a little bit like GMs are a little bit like these like famous stock pickers, like hedge fund managers, and all that. Like you can look really good within like a short amount of time. Like within like a year or 2, you can look like the best, smartest, like a genius. But like if you zoom out like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, like most of the time, like the 99% of people in the stock market are just like going to underperform, just like the S&P 500. And I look at the GM as a similar thing. Like last year, John Schneider and Pete Carroll look like absolute geniuses. If you could zoom out,
they're losing a lot of money.
They don't. And so there's I'm not trying to like, I'm not trying to say it's pure luck, because that's not true, because you have to match your evaluation with your coaching and your system and and get them in. And there's always injuries that like throw everything for a loop, and the way the draft falls will throw you for a loop and all that stuff. There's a million variables, but that's the point, is like, it's extremely difficult. There's a million variables. This is like chess. Like so many different things have to go exactly right. And you can't predict it before like draft night necessarily. And so, I don't know, long story short is I do think there is just an element of luck. And, I think the bottom line is, and this is the reason they've been like this, it's like volume drafting is the best way to go about it. Like have more, darts to throw at the dartboard, and you're more likely to hit the bullseye with a couple guys. So I think this is another year with like having number 5 overall, like there's a huge opportunity. Having 2 first rounders, that's a massive opportunity. They have another early 2nd rounder, which again, there's going to be a lot of good players in that area. They have the picks here to like really make a huge difference, but luck has to be on their side. So I don't know.
We got one last question for you before we get you out of here. I do think to your point about like zooming out versus like focusing on one class, like the 2022 class is probably an outlier. Whereas also the 2019 one probably is as well. Like the Seahawks are probably on average probably going to be somewhere in the middle, ideally.
Yeah.
Like the 2019 class is LJ Blair, Marquise Blair, DK, Cody Barton, Gary Jennings, who I think just caught a touchdown on the
He's in the XFL, yeah.
Yeah, or on a fake punt touchdown, I think a couple nights ago. Phil Haynes, Ugo Amadi, BBK, Travis Homer, DeMarcus Christmas, and John Ursua. Like that was just not a good class.
DeMarcus Christmas.
Yeah, whereas the 2022 class obviously is a home run. I think where the Seahawks are probably like, if you're being reasonable, if you get like every year, you get something like the 2020 class. It's not like ideal. There's no Pro Bowlers in there, but it's got Jordan Brooks, Darrell Taylor, and Damian Lewis. We're all like starting find players at their spots. And then Colby Parkinson was like a 4th round pick. DJ Dallas was a 4th round pick. And then after that, you're just, grasping at straws. Alton Robinson was the 5th round pick.
Yeah.
Frank Swain was a 6th. And then Stephon Sullivan was a 7th round pick. Like, it's not great. It's not bad, but that's probably like the median draft success rate. If you zoom out, you're not going to have a 2022 class every year, but you're probably not going to have a 2019 class every year because you're getting fired.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, the baseline goal should be to get like a starter or 2. Like, if you get a starter or 2, that is like, you just staying afloat. You're not like sinking your whole team. If you get 0 from a draft class, if you get absolutely like 0 from a draft class, there's a little bit of a lag to it, but like 2 or 3 years down the line, that's like massively important to your team. It could like really, really hurt your team. Then you're having to go out and spend a bunch of money, probably too much money in free agency. Half the time free agents don't really work out anyway. So you're like putting yourself really behind the 8 ball. And so like getting absolutely 0 out of a draft is a massive, massive thing that you can't have. You really just want to have like a couple singles or maybe a double here or there, and that'll set you up for sustained success. But getting a 0 is really bad.
I'll drop my mic there. Yes. I mean, if you get even a 2015 class, you'd be okay. That's Frank. That's Tyler. And then after that was just Terry Poole, Mark Glowinski, Ty Smith. I'm not even going to read the rest.
Glowinski, meanwhile, is like playing well for some other team. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
He's in the league.
Last one, Danny, just on this draft, 2023 class. Doesn't matter the position. Doesn't matter the round. Give us a sleeper. Just give us a guy. You're just like, I like this guy. Like, they should draft him. Don't really care where. Just draft him.
This is a guy I'm sure you know about. Michael Wilson from Stanford, I think, is a good sleeper. Yeah. He's again, this is don't take him early because there's a lot of like red flags with it, like his injury history and things like that. But like, man, he was so impressive at the Senior Bowl. He's a guy like legitimately was not on my radar coming in. He barely played last year. He's played like it was like 4, 6, and 4 or something like that, like the last 3 years in terms of like the overall number of games he's played. I can't remember off the top of my head, but he's been having injuries like the last 3 seasons. So he was not even really on my radar, but he looked really good. He was like one of the best receivers at the Senior Bowls, period. Good size. He's from Stanford. Every interview you see and hear with him is like, this guy is absolutely intense, like almost Doug Baldwin personality. Like he wants to be great. Like, obviously that's hard to really read if that's absolutely true, but he really definitely projects it well. So I think there's something there. Like if he's a 4th round pick, I'd be pretty excited about that because he could come in and be like a wide receiver 3 for you and like be a pretty good player. He's got the right attitude. I think he's got the size. So he's like another discount version of like a Cedric Tillman or something like that.
Wow. When you mentioned that, let me fact check a few things here. Wow. Yeah. Played 4 games in 2020, 4 games in 2021, only 6 games in 2022.
Yeah.
So not on the field very much, but according to Dane's draft guide, his girlfriend played soccer at Stanford and is currently a member of the United States national team.
Wow.
and the Portland Thorns. And she earned the NWSL 2022 MVP award. So there you go. His aunt apparently played soccer for the New Zealand World Cup team in 1991. And his cousin, Raphael McFarland, ran track at Sacramento State. He's got some good genes there.
Some bloodlines. Yeah, there we go.
Draft guide. You get shit like that.
That is amazing. Yeah.
Yes. I'm going to spend so much. James draft guide just recently came out. So
I was reading it this morning. It's so good.
Yeah, I can't wait. One time, the Seahawks drafted a guy, and we'll get out of here after this. When one of the nuggets in there was that his father works for the FBI.
Really?
I think it was Gary Jennings. I have to go back and look. But I just remember thinking, Dane, I never asked him. It's like, how the fuck did you find that out?
Yeah, seriously.
What?
It's like looking on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's so random. I don't know. I think Gary Jennings is a junior, so maybe just researching his name maybe brought that. I don't know. I don't know if there's like an FBI employee directory.
Probably not. No.
Yeah. Wow.
They're trying not to like tell too many people about like who they are and what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. That was just my last random draft nugget. That's all.
That's awesome.
It's okay, Mike. No, Danny, we want to thank you again for rapping with us, man. We appreciate it. All the insight, thoughts. We appreciate your time. And also be sure to check out Danny's guide for the draft because it is really good as well. And like I mentioned earlier, I just love how he intertwines different sports into his description of a player and his comp. I think that's really awesome and different. So I enjoy reading that as well. So thanks, Danny. Mike, anything you want to add?
I want to verify this was Gary Jennings for you. Sorry.
Who's the FBI guy?
I just don't want to use that and leave it hanging. It's like, and people ask me about it. Who's I can't find it now. This is just go to 2019 Dane's draft guide and we'll see if we can find. I think it was Gary Jennings though. And it was Gary.
There we go.
Wow.
He's the guy who had the feather in his cap, in his helmet. He had a feather. He kept a feather in his helmet when he was playing.
For good luck, huh?
I guess something like that for speed.
Yeah, Dane says Gary grew up in Richmond, but moved to Stafford, Virginia, prior to high school due to his father's job with the FBI.
Wow. Nice.
What a great that's like the first line on Gary's draft. Dang.
Draft this kid.
What? Shout out to Dane, man. Again, also shout out to Danny joining us. Danny Kelly of The Ringer also has a great draft guide, like Chris said. Great insights there, great player comps. I love player comps. They're just so fun. It just leads you down rabbit holes to looking up the guy you comp him to. Like, oh shit, that guy was good. That would be great. Anything Danny, before you get out of here, man?
Yeah, just like you said, the Ringer NFL Draft Guide. It's at nfldraft.theringer.com, and then the Ringer Fantasy Football Show / the Ringer NFL Draft Show, which I host a couple times a week. So yeah, check that out.
Right. Thank you, Danny. Again, I'm Mike. That's Chris. This is the Seahawks Man to Man podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. Spotify, Apple, The Athletic, YouTube, everywhere you get your podcast. We appreciate the love and support. We will catch you guys next week. We're out.